brotherhood, bellowed Ferrus. Our brotherhood died when you decided to turn traitor. Fulgrim backed away from his brother as he saw the murderous intent in his blazing silver eyes. Lorgar and Angron are ready to strike, and Mortarion will soon be with us. You must join me, or you will be destroyed. No, snarled Ferrus Manus, hefting Forge Breaker to his shoulder. It is you who will be destroyed. Ferrus, no, pleaded Fulgrim. Think about this. Would I come to you like this if I did not believe that it was the right thing to do? I don't know what's happened to you, Fulgrim, but this is treachery, and there is only one fate for traitors. So, you are going to kill me? Ferrus hesitated, and Fulgrim saw his shoulders sag in despair. I am your sworn honor, brother, and I swear to you that I do not lie, pressed Fulgrim, hoping that there was still a chance to convince his brother not to act in haste. I know you are not lying, Fulgrim, said Ferrus sadly. And that is why you have to die. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. I feel like the lighting is real good because I'm actually filming like in the evening, like sun been down for hours, evening, with the spotlight, and I'm like, the light is doing her favors, like, cheekbones, I'm here for it. No makeup. Well, okay, lip gloss, but other than that, no makeup. No, okay, good lighting. So in this month of love, we are returning to that love between brothers, Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim. They are more than just brothers under the Emperor of Mankind. They are sworn to one another. So it's really interesting when you read science fiction or any type of like great epics of war or anything like that. There's always this unknown item that can mess up any of the best laid plans. Doesn't matter how many T's are crossed or I's are dotted. It doesn't matter how many boxes have been checked. Doesn't matter how many people were conferred with and how many balances were checked. There is that unknown element that always plays a part in a human story. And that's why we are discussing it. As my shirt says, you can't tell, it says it's got it on there. Love, my friends, love. What better time than during February, the month of love, to discuss what love does to the best laid plans. We discussed in our last video about these two, how they are more than just brothers. They are the chosen opposite and pairing of one another. Amongst the Emperor's sons, all 20 of them minus 2, if you know, you know. But amongst all the Primarchs, they seem to have paired off, basically, into more significant friendships. You have to remember that basically all of the Primarchs are demigods. If the Emperor himself is a god, for all, lack of a better term for what such a being is, then any offspring he produces would be just one step below a god. So there are very few of what they are in the universe to begin with. So to find someone who is a true, like-minded, like-skilled, like-experienced person, it would be among the Primarch. They are not going to find the best of their friends, the closest of their brothers among mortal men. Even when we look at War Master Horus's Mordenval, the 4 generals he had who were his closest advisors, kicking off the whole heresy thing, but we'll talk about that another day. Even as close as they were to Horus, to the War Master, even one of them being named Little Horus, Horus Aximond, who looked just like Horus. They were pretty much a yes group. Their job was to go, Horus, that sounds like a good plan. They weren't Horus's peers. How does someone with the title War Master have a peer? The peers that these 20 Primarchs, minus 2, have are one another. I mean, the only Primarch to have a constant companion with him is technically Alfarius, but we're not even sure that the Emperor knows that Omegon exists. We don't know that he knows he made a twin. It's such a secret, and then that Legion's just its own crazy tale of its own. We'll get to Alpha Legion one day. But the Emperor set his sons up for a life of exclusivity. I think that's one of the things that people fail to realize about those who live the exclusive elitist life. When you are so far above everyone else, be it because of your socioeconomic status, a political status, entertainment value, sports, whatever it is, once you hit the elite, there's only one way to go from there. And to find people who have your lived experience that you can share life with becomes very difficult. Because when you're up here, there's always somebody reaching up to get something from you, and all you do is rain down your gifts on the peasants. That's just how it is. Not a comment of right or wrong, just is. But even the demigod, even the greatest among us, the greatest heroes, the strongest, the wisest, the greatest of orators, the greatest diplomats, even they need a friend. Even the greatest among us needs love and validation. That is the rogue element in every science fiction, in every war story, in every epic. Because when love gets involved, it doesn't matter what your plans were. Love is going to throw your plans out the window. The Emperor is facing a crisis that he doesn't know he's facing yet in this point in Warhammer history. But he's facing a crisis of his own making. He left the battlefront in the hands of his favorite son, Horus, and said, "You're now the War Master. You get to be me to your brothers." When your parents left the house and left a sibling in charge, how many of us just obeyed our siblings? I am the youngest. No. What do you mean he's in charge? I'll say to your face, Mom and Dad, he's in charge. And the second that door shuts and I hear the car pull away, I'm going to give him hell. Just for the fact that you said he was in charge and no other reason. He left the battlefield and then didn't tell his sons why he was leaving. Now, some of you parents are lucky. You raise kids that just believe what you say regardless. Good for you. The other 87% of children didn't believe a word you said. And if you don't tell them the truth, they're going to make it up. It's kind of like with conspiracy theories. The reason conspiracy theorists exist is because they feel like they're not being told the truth. So I'm going to make it up. And since you're not going to disprove what I said, then obviously what I said must be true. Children against parents do the same thing. If you're not going to tell me the truth, I'll make it up. And I'll decide that my version of the truth is the truth. Because perception is 9/10 of reality. That's just how it works. And that's what the Primarchs end up doing. Half of the Primarchs stay loyal to the Emperor. Them the good children. Them the ones that just believe their parents about everything. They're the ones who believe that if you didn't wear a hat in the cold, you'd catch the flu. They believed it. They believed that if you went in the pool, 30 minutes after eating, you were going to something. What was supposed to happen with that? Or that if you swallowed gum, it'd stay in your stomach for 7 years. That's them 10. They just believed. Doesn't necessarily mean the parent did anything wrong. But there does come a point in the maturing of relationship as children grow, as their position in your life grows, where we have to change how we interact with them. When they are 5, the answers are because I said so. When they're 10, 15 years old, let's talk about it. When they're 17, no honey, we cannot purchase X for you because we have a mortgage to pay. And if we do this, you don't have anywhere to sleep. And then when they're 40, here's the key to the safety deposit box. Here's how you access the 401k. Here's where the stocks and bonds are. It should change over time with the education, maturity, and position of that child in the parent's life. The Emperor didn't do that. He didn't mature his relationship with his sons. He just made an assumption that because I made you, you're always going to believe me and you're always going to do what I say. That's not how kids work. That's not how children have ever worked in the history of their being children. Ever. For being the longest lived human, you would have thought he'd seen 1 or 2 children be raised. Why did he think his 20, minus 2, were going to be any different than any of the other kids out there? He left all them kids under the charge of the oldest kid. And half of them went, okay, we can do this. It's fine. I make no waves. And the other half, so why is he going back to Terra? And why are you in charge? Oh, if you're going to be in charge, I can act up with you? Oh, okay, I make that deal. And what's crazy is the Emperor actually had very good reasons for going back to Terra, to his palace in the Himalayan mountains. He was battling chaos. He had things he needed to get figured out to save the universe for the humans. But did he tell his kids that? No, he did not. And after warring across the galaxy with them for so many centuries, you'd think he could have trusted them with a little information. He should have said something to somebody about chaos other than Malkador the Sigillite. It's a mess of his own making. And that unknown element, love. Because the Primarchs only have one another. There are not beings like them in the universe. Even their gene sons, the Space Marines, they are not like them. The Space Marines, as gargantuan and magnificent as they are, they tower over regular people. They're not Primarchs. There's only 20 of them. Minus 2. If you want to know why, go look it up. So they form kinships together. There are Primarchs who become closer to one another than other Primarchs are. That they find out, I have more in common with this one. Me and this particular brother, we have better conversation. We can best each other in battle. We can learn from each other. We can make each other stronger. And that's what Ferrus and Fulgrim have in one another. We talked about how Ferrus and Fulgrim first encountered each other in the last we looked in this book. And it's actually beautiful. They each make their best weapon to show which one was the greatest craftsman and perfection, blah, 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 blah. And then they end up admiring the other's weapons so much that they trade weapons as a sign of their love and kinship. They are both at that time still committed to the idea of the Imperium of Man and their father, the Emperor. They're both still all in. But one gets corrupted and the other doesn't. But to be fair, to hear Horus and Lorgar and Erebus and Fulgrim and Perturabo and the others tell it, they weren't corrupted, they were enlightened. Because from what they understand, and what the denizens of chaos have revealed to them, is that the Emperor at some point, once his great war is over, there will be no more use for beings whose purpose of existence was to make war. What do you do with beings who were created to make war when there's no longer any war? And that kickstarts the seeds of heresy. But Fulgrim loves his brother Ferrus. He doesn't want to be an enemy to the brother he loves more than anyone. There are all kinds of love. All kinds of love. There's romantic love. There's parent-child love. There is teacher-student love. There is brother-to-brother love, sister-to-sister, brother and sister love. So many kinds of love. But the bond of brothers, and especially brothers who are battle-worn together, so strong. Some of the strongest friendships you will ever see formed are people who have seen combat together. Because they've been through some things that no one else has been through, that only they can compare. And not only are they brothers by blood, but they are brothers in arms, and they are brothers in purpose. And they have true, deep, familial love for one another. And they both believe themselves to be correct, and they both believe the other to be in error. Love. Doesn't matter how grand the plan was. Once love is introduced into the equation, it will throw off all of the measurements and calculations. Fulgrim brought his sword up as Ferrus Manus swung his hammer for his head with blinding speed. The two weapons rang with a clash of steel that Fulgrim felt echo in the very depths of his soul. Flames blazed from his blade, and lightning crackled from the head of Ferrus's hammer. The two Primarchs stood, locked together. Fulgrim pressing his fiery blade towards Ferrus, and the commander of the Ironheads holding him at bay with the heft of his hammer. Burning light and sound filled the iron forge, the weapons roaring as the unimaginable forces harnessed in their creation were unleashed. Ferrus dropped his guard and hammered his fist into Ferrus's face. Fulgrim's face. The force of the blow enough to crush the helmet of the technical dreadnought armor, but barely enough to bruise the flesh of a Primarch. Fulgrim rode the blow and smashed his forehead into his brother's face, spinning on his heel and slashing his red-hot blade towards Ferrus's throat. The blade clanged on Ferrus's gorget, sliding clear without so much as scratching the black plate. Ferrus spun away from a return strike and swung his hammer one-handed as he bought some space with a wide swing. The two warriors circled one another warily, both aware of how deadly the other could be, having fought side by side for decades of war. Fulgrim saw tears in his brother's eyes, and the mixture of sorrow and pleasure he took from the sight made him want to throw down his weapon and clasp his brother to his breast that he might share such a stupendous experience. "This is pointless, Ferrus," said Fulgrim. "Even now the War Master is preparing to expunge the weak from his forces on Istvan III. "What are you talking about, traitor?" demanded Ferrus. Fulgrim laughed. "The power of 4 legions will be unleashed against Istvan III, but only those portions that are not loyal to the War Master and his grand designs for the future of the galaxy. Soon, perhaps even already, those weak elements will be dead, cleansed in the fire of a viral bombardment." "The Life Eater," whispered Ferrus, and Fulgrim relished the horror he saw in his brother's eyes. "Thrown alive, Fulgrim. How could you be a party to such murder?" Wild laughter bubbled up inside Fulgrim, and he leapt to the attack, his blazing sword cleaving the air in a fiery arc. Once more Ferrus's hammer came up to block the blow, but it was not a weapon designed for long duels, and Fulgrim rolled the blade over the haft and stabbed for his brother's face. The burning blade scored along Ferrus's cheek, the skin blackening to match his armor, and his brother cried out as the sword he had forged dealt him a grievous wound. Blinded for the briefest second, he staggered away from Fulgrim. Fulgrim stepped in, not letting his brother widen the gap, and smashed his fist repeatedly into Ferrus's face. Hearing the bones splinter beneath his assault, Ferrus reeled from the punches, blood drenching the lower half of his face. Fulgrim's senses shrieked with pleasure at the sight of his brother's pain, and his every sense was stimulated by what he was doing. As Ferrus stumbled, blinded and incoherent, Fulgrim closed and swung his sword for Ferrus's neck. The sword arced towards Ferrus, but instead of raising his weapon to block the blow, Ferrus dropped the hammer and turned into the blow, catching the descending blade in his molten silver hands. Fulgrim cried out as the pain of the impact jarred his arms. He tried to pull the weapon free, but Ferrus had it locked in his hands. The blade was utterly immobile, the chrome steel of his brother's hands swirling as though changing from solid matter to liquid metal. Fulgrim blinked as the metal of his sword seemed to liquefy, and the fire of its blade rippled in Ferrus's hands. Ferrus opened his eyes, and the fire of the sword was alive in the silver coins of his eyes. "I forged this blade," hissed Ferrus, "and I can break it too." No sooner had the words left his mouth than Fire Blade exploded in a bright flare of molten metal. Both Primarchs were hurled from their feet by the force of the blast, their armor and flesh burned by white-hot gobbets of molten metal. Fulgrim rolled and blinked stars from his eyes, stunned by the force of the explosion. He still held the ruined Fire Blade, though all that was left of the sword above the hilt was a hissing nub of metal. The sight of the ruined blade penetrated the red mist of sensation that drove him, and the symbolism of the weapon's destruction was not lost on him. Ferrus was dead to him, and would rather die than join the new galactic order of the War Master. He had hoped it would not come to this, but he knew that there was no other way this drama could end. Ferrus lay insensible, his hands glowing with the wrath of the fireblade's unmaking. His brother moaned in pain at the destruction he had wrought, and Fulgrim pushed himself to his feet as his brother groaned at the horror of what had transpired within his sanctum. Fulgrim leaned down to look upon his brother's warhammer, a weapon he had poured his heart and soul into, a weapon that had been forged for his own hand in a time that seemed as though it belonged to another age. The weapon felt good as he hefted it easily over one shoulder, as he stood triumphantly over his brother's recumbent body. Ferrus propped himself up on his elbows and looked up through blood-gummed eyes. You had the best kill me, for I'll see you dead if you do not. Fulgrim nodded and raised Forge Breaker over his head, ready to deliver the death blow. The mighty warhammer trembled in his grip, though Fulgrim knew that it was not its weight that made it do so, but the realization of what he was about to do. The darkness of his eyes met with the blazing silver of his brother's, and he felt his resolve waver in the face of the murder he was about to commit. He lowered the hammer and said, "You are my brother, Ferrus. I would have walked unto death with you. Why could you have not done the same for me?" "You are not my brother," spat Ferrus through the blood of his ruined face. Fulgrim swallowed hard as he sought to summon the strength to do what he knew must be done. He heard a dim voice far away whisper that screamed at him to crush the life from Ferrus Manus, but its entreaties were drowned by the memories of the great friendship he had once shared with his brother. For what could compete with such a bond? "I will always be your brother," said Fulgrim, and swung the hammer upward in an arc that connected thunderously with Ferrus's jaw. Ferrus's head snapped back as he collapsed to the floor of the iron forge, rendered unconscious by a blow that would have set a mortal man's head spinning through the air for 100 meters. The voice in his head screamed distantly for him to finish the killing, but Fulgrim ignored it and turned away from his brother. He kept hold of the hammer and made his way to the gates that led back to the Anvilarium. Behind him, Ferrus Manus lay broken, but alive. What a story. I will say, of all the Horus Heresy novels, this one and the first Heretic, at least for me, because there are others that got some things in them. I mean, Angel Exterminatus, I'm looking at you. There are some other novels that have some things in them, but these two really humanize the Primarchs, in my opinion. It is so easy to think of people that are on a pedestal, whether it is a head of industry, a leader in our companies we might admire, a business owner, athletes, musicians, even people in our own lives, parental figures, grandparents, pastors, other religious figures. It's easy to put people way up here. And then one day we find out they're human. Then one day we find out they have the same flaws that all of us do. And then one day we find out that in the name of love, they'll do the crazy things that any old human will do in the name of love. Love caused Ferrus to hate his brother because his brother could never be a traitor. And it was love that kept Fulgrim from ending his brother's life. Because that was his brother. It's interesting. The greatest triumphs of human history and probably our greatest troubles have all come in the name of love. This is why I love the writers of the Black Library and all of the Warhammer novels so much, because they are great students of humanity, of history, philosophy, politics, sociology. They pull out those elements of who we are and insert them into this fictional universe in such a way that we can directly connect with the characters, understand them, feel them in a way. I know a lot of people say, I just couldn't get into Warhammer. Try a different book, is what I would challenge you. There are so many good authors, so many different authors. I have actually started reading a different set of novels. I've put Fabius Ball to the side for right now because I'm reading Minka Lusk. I wanted to read a female-driven Warhammer story for a while, and I started reading that in my work travels. It's my travel book now, and it's a good one. It's a good one. Try a different thing. You don't have to go full Horus Heresy. Like I love me some Horus Heresy, but I started in the 40k universe, not in the 30k world, which Heresy is 30k. And there's also the fantasy side as well. So I've never read much of the fantasy, because for me, like when it comes to fantasy, I'm very much an LOTR girl. I'm a Harry Potter girl. I'm an anime girl when it comes to my fantasy. But Warhammer does have a complete, like, not out in space side. It has a elves and orcs side as well. Although orcs are in both. Anywho, but I would challenge you, find another one, find another novel. Find another character to follow, because they've done such a good job over the years of building this cohesive universe and recognizing that they need different types of characters and voices to connect with the widest audience possible. You'll find some. I'm going to let you know. Fulgrim, First Heretic, they go there. And, Angel Exterminatus, they go there too. But you know what? To really understand and be in the place of the novels, I've said this before in talking about other books, it's okay to go there if it gives the right tone to the setting, so you understand the gravity of what you're experiencing, of what you're reading, of what's happening in the context of the story. It's heavy material, but God, is it good. It's good. So, that's my resounding endorsement. Go pick up Fulgrim. Boy, that is a How many times do you think I've read this book? How many times? I mean, just look at it. But as always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.